All right, No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world here at our new location, very high security, to interview the one and only DJ Vlad.
What's up, Adam?
How you doing, man?
I'm good.
Oh.
I'm good, man. Kind of a sad day in LA right now.
This is a very good point.
With Nipsey's funeral, man. You can just feel it, especially being in LA. You just feel the weight of it all, man. So,
Yeah, you remember when you first became familiar with him? Because you interviewed him, what, 5-6 years ago, or?
Yeah, man. I remember when he first came out. I think he was actually signed to a major label. It may have been Epic. I'm not totally sure. But yeah, we'd been hearing about him, and then I think one of my people did a short interview with him. Like this was I think like 9 years ago, where we asked like the top 5 girls. And he mentioned Lauren London.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like he actually like spoke it into existence years later. And then me and him got to actually sit down in New York, and we did like about maybe like a 40-minute interview or so that we're putting out today, like the whole thing. Cool dude, man. Ran into him a few times. Only good things to say, quite honestly.
Yeah, he's a weird one to see past, because that's pretty much the consensus, is that nobody has anything negative to contribute about him. It's like we're seeing a reaction to his passing that a lot of people are saying they haven't seen it since Tupac.
Yeah, man. I mean, you saw the big reaction from XXX and Tentacion, but I can honestly say this is a bigger outcry.
For LA, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's pretty crazy. So, okay, a lot of people, I feel like they have no idea where Vlad is coming from. So I feel like we owe it to them at least to reiterate the story of where Vlad came from and how Vlad became who he is today. Because, I mean, let's just start off, I guess, before we even say that. I'm just a massive fan of the content. I'm a massive fan of the machine that you guys seem to have in place. That's like part of what I've been trying to figure out as just a fan is like, how the fuck does this guy produce this much content, and how has he been doing it for so goddamn long too?
So what do you want to know?
Okay, well let's go back. Let's go back. So you were born
in the Ukraine.
In the Ukraine.
It used to be part of the USSR, part of the Soviet Union at that time, so I consider myself Russian, even though technically it's not Russia anymore, but I was born into Russia.
Okay.
And I moved to the U.S. when I was about 4 years old.
And you moved where?
First I moved to Massachusetts, then we stayed there for a few years.
Where?
Springfield.
Oh, nice, okay. Yeah. Western Mass.
Yeah, lived in Springfield. And then my parents moved to to the West Coast, first to San Francisco for, maybe about a year. And then I grew up in San Mateo, kind of a suburb of San Francisco. Went to school at UC Berkeley and kind of stayed in Berkeley and Oakland for a bunch of years.
And you were always a hip-hop fan this whole time?
Always a hip-hop fan, like from elementary school. When hip-hop sort of kind of became national outside of New York, the New York City Breakers became sort of a thing on television. I kind of became a breakdancer during that time, and I started buying like the early like Grandmaster Flash, the Furious 5 albums, the first Run DMC album. And really there was very little hip hop, period. So I would just go to the record store and buy, a vinyl just, without even hearing it first, and go home and hope it was dope.
To the thanks and like the liner.
Seeing who produced it, and man, you couldn't really, went to like Warehouse Records. You couldn't really listen to this shit ahead of time. So you just bought it and hope for the best.
What do you feel like drew you to that world?
I think being a Russian kid named Vlad. Right at the height of the Cold War with Russia, where I was like basically the devil to everybody.
So you were getting jokes in school like the way a Muslim kid might in 2001.
Yeah. I mean, imagine, right after 9/11, there's a kid named Osama, in the school with no other Muslim kids, and everyone's looking at him like he's the enemy. Like a lot of fights, a lot of teasing, a lot of arguing, just a lot of uncomfortableness, because there was no other, where I was living, there wasn't a Russian community. It was really just me, and that's it. So sort of like the, hip hop was kind of like really like an outcast kind of culture during that time. And I just kind of got drawn to it, between the music and the breakdancing. It just became my thing, and it just became a lifelong thing after that.
Do you have any like recollections of your early encounters with different media outlets or anything like that? Were you somebody who was like particularly drawn to the source? Because myself, I noticed really drawn from like young age to any kind of media.
I read every issue of The Source. I read every issue of XXL when it first came out. I was reading rap pages. I was reading like, in the Bay Area, we had a bunch of independent mags like Industry Rule, 4080, just whatever I can get my hands on. And kind of looking at it now, like I never thought that I would have, a media outlet that's bigger than some of those, you know, magazines that I used to read. So it was
and
just
you're
kinda
assisted by the
mind-blowing.
fact that some of them have not fared so well.
Not so well. Not so well. Yeah, the Source is kind of just scraping along. I mean, Double XL has their, you know, their freshman issue, but that's kind of their one claim to fame.
Right.
You know, overall, numbers wise, it is what it is.
And you know, it's the weird thing to see is that if you ask me, Double XL and the Source and stuff, they sort of forfeited a lot of their influence to the blogs during the blog era, and then the blogs sort of disappeared over time and ushered in a new era. So it's kind of like the institutions that killed off the hip hop Bible and such, like they're not really around to witness the end result.
Yeah, I mean, I actually met with the Source and Double XL and offered to work with them, and they really kind of just snubbed their nose at me. We're like, "No, we got this. You know, we don't need your help."
Really?
So I'm like, "All right." Yeah, I mean, at one point I was going to buy Double XL. I was actually talking
year?
to the publisher. This was like, it was before they got bought out, like maybe about 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. Like I said, I was talking to Dennis Page, who was the publisher of Harris Publishing, their parent company.
Right.
And me and him had a couple talks about it, but what he was offering kind of didn't really make a lot of sense.
And what would you really have to gain from that besides, you know, a brand name?
I think, you know, well, number one, you have the catalog that comes with it, and I think that what we do is kind of a little bit different than what Double XL does. They're more focused on the music side, so it would have been cool to kind of have kind of a pure music kind of play like that.
As somebody who's like primarily a YouTube channel, there is always that guy, that sort of urge of like, fuck, like it would be kind of cool to just really hone in on the website thing. Although you have the website, but it feels like the YouTube channel is like by far the focus at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I think like last year, that's when the YouTube revenue started to really surpass the website revenue. But I mean, website revenue is still strong. You know, the app is still strong, but YouTube at this point has kind of gone through the roof.
So what about like the time period between you being like a young early hip hop fan up until you start to get into the media game? What was like, what did you concern yourself with during those times?
I mean, I started producing, you know, like, I mean, from going from just being a fan and a breakdancer and, you know, just someone who just loved listening to hip hop. When I got to college at UC Berkeley, I started, you know, there was kind of a hip hop community there, which really, there wasn't one where I was growing up. You know, this was like, you got to see Hieroglyphics and Souls of Mischief kind of blow up, you know, right in front of us, you know, hanging out in Berkeley. So I started making beats and I started producing. And that kind of did that for a couple of years, but wasn't all that great in it. Then I started DJing, and then that's when things started to kind of take off. And I moved to New York in 2002 as a mixtape DJ.
Okay.
And that's when things started to ramp up. I started coming out these there's these mixtapes called Rap Phenomenon. There was a Biggie one and a Tupac one that won like every mixtape award.
And you were the one actually doing all the scratching or cuts or whatever it might have been?
Not so much the scratching, but more like the blending.
Right.
Like the taking the, you know, because from being a producer, it's like going from like, okay, taking these vocals and putting on this beat, then maybe getting like Bun B to come do a verse.
And in retrospect, it seems crazy because it's like, wow, I was getting away with a shitload of copyright infringement.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. And I remember the day that I said, you know, I'm not gonna fuck with this mixtape shit anymore, because I had a business selling these mixtapes to little mom and pop stores, and then DJ Drama got busted. They raided his house, his
and he was the biggest
studio.
one.
He was one of the biggest ones at the time, and I remember they towed his car, and they seized his bank accounts, and I'm like, this shit ain't worth it.
They were making an example out of him basically to tell people like you better fucking stop too, right?
And you know, it was a hustle. It wasn't a career. It was like, you know, I wasn't going to keep elevating, making these illegal compilations, and it wasn't turning into record deals. I wasn't becoming DJ Khaled. I was getting booked for shows, and I was doing shows in Australia and Japan and Europe, and that was cool, but it wasn't like, I was starting to get older, and I'm like, all right, this has a shelf life.
How much was the most mixtapes you were selling in a month at the height?
Maybe a few thousand.
Okay.
A few thousand. I was paying my mortgage, and you know, I had like a condo in Jersey, and you know, I had a little BMW X3. You know, nothing, not balling, but you know, living okay.
Right.
You know.
But were you looking at the hip hop media as if it was an opportunity?
You know, I was doing the mixtapes, and I saw that was about to kind of go away because the mom and pop stores were going away. So then I started doing DVDs, like street DVDs, and that was kind of cool. And that was kind of starting to go away as well because DVDs were going away.
And that was gone by 2007, 2008 was when it started to really fall off?
Yeah, 2008, and that was kind of, and I started doing documentaries. I did this documentary called Ghost Ride the Whip, which was, was picked up. It was on MTV, and I think Netflix picked it up, and that didn't really make any money, even though it was a cool project. And then YouTube came around in 2008 with the partner program, and I just saw the vision. I said, this is the next shit, like right off the bat. I said, this right here is going to be the biggest video platform on earth.
So you knew. That's pretty impressive.
I knew. Well, because, when I went to Berkeley, I was a computer science major. So I was a tech guy already. I was a computer programmer for a couple of years before I kind of moved into the music thing.
So that's interesting. That's kind of how you landed on it so early, is you already had that like computer knowledge, and then you also had the hip hop knowledge, and you were able to bring it all together.
I'm at Berkeley, which is kind of Silicon Valley. Like the .com thing was happening. Like I saw technically I saw the vision of it.
Right.
Like, okay, you could make this video and other websites could put it on. Like, oh, so I don't need a big website to make this video big. So it kind of, like the light bulb went off. The light bulb just went off, and I said, all right, fuck this DJ shit, fuck this DVD shit, fuck this documentary shit. Like, this is the next thing that I'm going to focus everything on. And, it was a gamble, which,
because it couldn't have been making too much money at first. Was it at first like not enough to really justify the investment, but you saw the long term?
Yeah, no, it wasn't, but it was like the ownership. It was the long term of where it's going. Like, okay, it's not making a lot, but I own it forever, because fucking with these movie companies, I've never seen a royalty check. And, I've had documentaries on Showtime for like 2 or 3 years, and I've never seen a royalty check. So you're like, okay, it's not a lot of money right now, but I own it forever, and it'll make money forever. So there's as long as I keep increasing my catalog, and as long as the catalog is important, pieces. Like, for example, we were just talking about Nipsey Hussle, my Nipsey Hussle interview. Like, that interview, a piece of that interview was the one that LA Times referenced. It's the one that NBC played when they did their segment on Nipsey Hussle, and they talked about Vlad TV, and my logo was on there and everything else like that. Like, we're part of the Nipsey Hussle story now. Yeah. Which is important. And that was the vision that I saw early on. Like, we're creating a catalog of important video content, which we will own forever, that I could pass on to next generations. Yeah. And that was the thing.
That's kind of the thing that I find so addictive about doing this, and you sort of expressed it to me previously. I think we were talking about your old Cardi B interview clips, but the idea that you could do an interview that maybe doesn't seem so significant at the time. I'm sure when you're doing the Cardi B interview, it was cool, but it wasn't, you didn't think it was going to shatter the internet, and then all of a sudden one day she's like one of the top rappers, and that piece has a ton more meaning. The Nipsey thing, all of a sudden just new life is just breathed into that content as soon as there's a societal condition that makes it more important.
Yeah, I mean, I don't celebrate these situations. It's sad. I don't want to be, have a bunch more views because this man got tragically murdered. But, but that's, people want to go back and reminisce and see what this person had to say. And it's important. At one point, all of us are going to be gone. And what we're going to leave behind is these videos and these conversations and our thoughts. And I'm trying to capture a lot of that, while I'm here.
Yeah, and I mean, it can happen in positive ways and it can happen in negative ways. Like with the Cardi thing, she goes on to have this amazing career. She blows up. All of a sudden, that content is so much more important. And then it goes in the other way too. Like my ex interview, seemed really important even before he passed, but then he passed, and all of a sudden it takes on this whole new level of importance. And like, I think you get that in a way that a lot of people maybe don't. That this content isn't just important because of the next couple of weeks, where it's maybe going to make the vast majority of its money, but it's just important because these videos that you're putting on YouTube are still going to be being watched 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
100 years from now.
With a little luck, yeah.
Maybe even 1,000 years from now. Yeah. I mean, honestly, like some of these people will go down as icons, like a Nipsey. Like this is really my bigger purpose in what I do. It's not just how much money can I make right now. It's like, what am I actually capturing, with my interviews.
How would you describe your interview style?
I think hard hitting. Like, I didn't look at other hip hop interviewers as role models at all.
Because you didn't really have that because you started so early.
No, that's not true.
Okay.
Sway has been doing it forever.
True.
Funk Flex has been doing it forever. Angie Martinez has been doing it forever. Big Boy,
True.
who you just interviewed, has been doing it forever.
But there wasn't as much like video content of those interviews being created. But I guess there was some.
But it's still,
right?
it's still the conversations,
True,
right?
yeah.
And I listen to the Wake Up Show, Sway, since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But I just always felt like these interviews were a lot of times more PR than they were real interviews. Like, I looked at 60 Minutes. Like, okay, a 60-minute interview changes legislation. You know what I mean? A 60-minute interview come out and laws will be changed. Companies rise and fall, over these types of interviews. Like, countries revolt and that type of thing from 60 Minutes. That's what I was trying to accomplish. I wasn't trying to just talk about someone's new album and what kind of jewelry they got on. Even though we do cover that, it's like there's a bigger purpose in what I do.
Yeah, and was that just obvious to you from the beginning that you wanted to be that kind of interviewer? Because it's, I fluctuate between like that attitude of like I want to ask people the hardest hitting shit that I can think of. Sometimes I'll do an interview where it's like, I did a Spice One the other day.
I did him.
Yeah, I know, and I watched it, and that made me not really want to ask him a lot of the heavy hitting shit. That not because he reacted badly to it, but it's like, you got him to tell the bank robbing story. So he showed up in my studio, and we also did the interview at like 9, 10 at night, and he's drinking and we're smoking, and we just ended up chilling, talking shit for 2 hours. But there's definitely a value to what you're doing because you're taking care of like certain stories there that maybe wouldn't be covered by somebody who was doing more of a softball interview. Yeah, that's why I didn't actually ask him about a lot of the things that might have been some of the most interesting stuff is like, he went on your show and told the bank robbing story. So that's, you're covering stuff that's so important that it sort of makes it so that, other interviews don't necessarily need to touch on those things.
Yeah, you could ask, I've asked people the same questions that other interviewers have asked. I would just start kind of going in different directions with their answers.
I noticed one thing that you'll do is that you'll ask somebody something and they'll sort of give you a little bit of around they'll beat around the bush, and then you'll say, so you're saying that this happened. And you just lay it out in plain English, and they're sort of like, all right, well, when you put it so up front, it's almost hard for them to like deal with the fact that you're saying that they just did what they said they did.
It is what it is, man. Like, we're not here to do PR. The best interviews are supposed to be somewhat uncomfortable. The interviews that go down in history are not just where everyone's happy and just talking about all the fun stuff. It's the stuff that really, like a Mob James interview where he talks about his brother getting killed and he's crying as he's describing it. Like, those are the interviews that go down as legendary interviews. It's not, like, you look at, and I'm sure you deal with this, like, these PR companies and these management companies, they always want to go for the radio stations, right? So all the big artists, they'll go do their runs and do the radio stations, and the video hit YouTube and it'll get like 130 views. Not 130,000, 130 views, because it's a lame-ass interview. And it's a channel that isn't even relevant, but they keep doing these fucking radio interviews. And it's like, yo, this is not what I'm doing. And also, with radio interviews, it's a different format, right? It's hip hop doesn't have talk shows, talk radio, like a Howard Stern. So they'll do an interview and they'll put like a little 10-minute, or a 5-minute part between songs, and then go right back to the music again. Because I've had conversations with like Hot 97 and all them, and I'm like, hey, we should talk about bringing Vlad TV on this platform. He's like, well, nah, like, this ain't gonna work on here because we gotta play music the whole time, and we can only, play a couple minutes of your interview. And I was like, well, that's not what we do. So
right. Yeah, that's interesting though, because there is that dynamic that unfolds now where you didn't have all these radio stations making video content and putting it on YouTube until the past couple of years. Even when I started like 3-4 years ago, that wasn't really much of a thing. Has that been strange for you to watch that happen? To see like, does it annoy you at all to see all these like people jumping in the fray?
No, they're just playing catch up. But you know, we have a 10-year head start.
Right.
So, you know, come on.
There's a big choice that you need to make as an interviewer where, you know, have there been times where you thought maybe I should try to be more of a friend to the artist instead of asking the hardest questions? Because that's always sort of the direction that can be difficult. And we all know that people who get into the industry, they usually end up choosing the side of being friends with everybody rather than being the hard-hitting journalist type.
I mean, look, are there certain people I interview that, you know, I know don't want to mention certain things? Like, you know, for example, like if I have a regular guest and I know there's a certain thing that they may not want to talk about, I'll have a conversation with them beforehand. I say, hey, you know, I had heard that X, Y, and Z happened to you. Do you want to talk about it? And they're like, nah, I don't really want to fuck with this. So it's like, all right, cool. We're gonna let it go. But it's also not going to be a cakewalk. You know, when you sit down with me, it's not just going to be, you know, all promo and, you know, like lighthearted. It's like, yo, when we sit down, you know, we're going to talk about the real shit, because if we don't, it's not going to get the views and the impact. It's going to be a waste of everyone's time. You know, like I remember when I interviewed Big U, I'm like, hey, you know, do you want me to run the titles by you? He's like, nah, do you. Nah, like I'm here for Vlad TV to do Vlad TV. And, you know, shit, the full interview did like 1 million views, and then the parts did probably another 2 or 3 million, and, you know, went down as a huge impact.
Right. For a guy that, if you had just titled it The Big U Interview, it might have done 100,000, 80,000. It wouldn't have done crazy numbers like you did.
Wouldn't have done the millions.
Right.
It would have done the millions. And, you know, like I take a lot of pride in interviewing these people, like, you know, like Lil D, who's the crack king of Oakland, or, you know, like I could just go on and on and on about all these people that are not household names that nobody has really heard of outside their particular cities, and it will get millions of views, and it will make a big impact, and these people end up having, you know, go on speaking tours, and they end up getting, you know, my interview with Michelle A, that's how she got her biopic. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they literally, if you look at my Michelle A interview, the biopic is damn near chronological to how I laid out my interview with her.
Wow.
And that's dope. I love it. I hope more people get movie deals and stuff like that. You know, people get more shows on bookings and everything else like that. Plus, they just get stopped all the time. And, you know, and that's why people come back. They're like, yo, like, you know, I have this national TV show, but everyone keeps talking about Vlad interviews when I'm out and about. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Just like to be able to have that impact. Have you ever been sitting in an interview with somebody and you started to just get mad about the fact that they're being evasive, or that they're not really like sometimes if they don't want to be honest about a certain topic, fine, but sometimes it just feels like they're not even being honest with themselves, and you asking them questions that draw attention to the reality of the situation makes them upset. It could be very frustrating. A lot of people probably don't really understand that about doing interviews.
I mean, look, I mean, it's my job, right? People think like, Vlad, Adam, y'all just sit and ask questions. Y'all don't really do shit. Like, I could do that. You know, people always like, yo, like, I could do a better job than that. And it's like, all right, see how easy it is when you actually sit down with someone and you have 40 minutes and, you know, the person isn't being open, and you're trying to, it's almost like a puzzle piece. Like, okay, well, he doesn't want to talk about this. Well, let's talk about this, and let's meander around and see if we can get into an interesting topic along the way. Because, you know, with me, I mean, I have my notes laid out, but you don't know what's going to get brought up randomly. So when that gets brought up, suddenly you have to kind of rearrange your whole game plan. Yeah.
Like, how many walkouts have you had? A bunch, or?
I've never had a walkout.
Okay.
An actual, they left and not coming back.
Do they always come back?
I mean, you know, Tretch got kind of upset at the very end of our interview when I was kind of digging into like Tupac's death, because they were very close friends, and he just kind of, he was just like, man, fuck. You know, you could see him. He gets up. His mic is still kind of dangling, and he's just like, man, I can't take any more of these questions. And, you know, but it was really the end of our interview anyways. And, you know, me and him shook hands afterwards. And it was emotional. But I'm not, you know, when people compare me to some of these, like radio interviewers, where, like, when they don't own their own content, they're trying to get people to walk out and scream and do a bunch of stupid shit because it creates these viral moments. But with me, like, I don't go for that. Like, I don't want a person to walk out and be frustrated and put that out. Like, if that actually happens, we'll cut that out of the, if a person gets frustrated and doesn't want to talk, like, we'll take a pause, we'll cut it out of our final footage and say, okay, look, let's just, you know, I'm not trying to upset you. Like,
but if they don't give you a good interview, you're still gonna run that, probably, right?
Yeah, we've scrapped interviews before.
Okay.
We've scrapped. If a person just being kind of disrespectful and it's just like, this is just lame.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I'm not even gonna run.
But there's a party that still wants to show the fans that, just to be like, look at what a dickhead your fucking hero is.
Somewhat, but, like, you know, like I said, I don't want to be the platform where people, you know, because you'll be known for that. You know what I mean? You'll be known for that, and people will come in with that agenda.
Right. Okay,
I'm gonna go on Vlad and I'm gonna flip over a table because that's what the last guy did, and it got 10 million views. Like,
right.
Nah, like, you're not. That's not what we're gonna show.
Right.
If you do that, it's never gonna come out. So, yeah, man, I don't try. Like I said, it's a long-term vision of what I'm doing, like past my own lifetime.
Really?
So
past your own life?
Past my own lifetime.
Really?
Yeah, because these videos, like, you really don't think people are gonna watch that XXXTentacion interview
I definitely,
after you die?
No, I think so for sure. It's just, I haven't really, like, thought about it.
They're watching it after he dies.
Yeah.
How's that?
More.
I've just proved my point.
I'm watching it more.
They're watching it more after he's not around anymore. So they're probably going to watch it when you're not around anymore. So that's the mindset that I put myself in. Like, this is going to be watched by generations later. So you're going to be a buffoon, or is this going to be a serious situation that someone's going to, you know, look at it and say, okay, I could relate that to my own life.
Yeah, and I mean, what I think is interesting too is that there's a lot of situations that play out in hip hop that everybody wants to know about exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But people won't talk about it on camera because it's too early, it's disrespectful, or they just don't want to be seen as a snitch or whatever. What I like about your shit is that you will go and get that story 20 years later. So it's like getting all the stories from all the people associated with the Tupac thing 20 years later when they have no reason not to talk about it. I mean, to me, that's brilliant because that's a content gold mine that's just sitting there. As somebody who has amazing stories to tell, they don't have any sort of real, you know, they're not a big name or whatever, but then you sort of enable them to tell stories that are really important to us, really understanding, like, the full history of a lot of important artists.
Yeah, man. I mean, my favorite interviews are about people that I was fans of before I ever became part of the industry. Because at that point, it was just so pure. And, you know, you're not thinking about money, you're not thinking about views, you're just thinking about how much you love this music. And to be able to then go back and sit down with this person for an hour and a half and just pick their brain and talk about how much their music affected you. Like, I did Large Professor, you know, who was kind of the executive producer of Illmatic, one of my favorite albums from Nas. And it's like, I really got to sit there and you know, live out kind of like a childhood, you know, kind of wish. Like, you know, when I was listening to Illmatic, I never thought I'd be interviewing the producers of Illmatic. So yeah, man, it's just one of those things. You know, I'm getting to live out, you know, a lot of my passions, you know, as an adult, and it's dope. Yeah.
Like, just getting to meet people and have conversations. I think people probably forget that to somebody like me or you, that alone is very, very exciting. Like, Waka Flocka called me yesterday to tell me about an artist that he has. Now, granted, like, people tell me about their fucking artists all the fucking time, but I was still pretty in shock. Like, I can't believe that Waka is hyped about an artist and is literally just chose to call me to tell me about it. I mean, for me as just a rap fan, I was pretty blown away by that.
It just goes to show how much of an impact you make. You know, how important you are in the grand scheme of the music industry.
Let me ask you this. When was the first time that you went viral and you felt like DJ Vlad was what everybody was talking about during that? We've all had these couple of days storms where it's like, holy shit, like, you know, because for a while you're building and building, you're steadily building your content, building up your name, and then all of a sudden there's always just a fucking typhoon.
Oh man, there's just so many. I think the one time that I went viral, I guess by today's standards, was probably like the Soulja Boy interview, which turned into the Soulja Boy challenge,
which was only a few years ago.
Yeah, and you know, there's been lots of videos that people have all picked up on, but like people were creating their own versions of this interview, like the guy who played Bobby Brown, you know, on the New Edition story, him and his other, like a crew of his actors recreated that interview into like a mini movie. And it was like, shit, like people are creating our own, you know, people are creating versions of my interview. Like that interview was, like if you watch the Childish Gambino Feels Like Summer animated music video, they actually recreate that Soulja Boy interview in that music video.
Wow, really?
Yeah, like you see the Soulja Boy and you see a Little Pump and I think Trippie Redd. Like and they're like sitting there like watching him as he's.
Oh, okay, I remember this.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it was like,
okay.
Damn, like this is like something that just keeps living on years later.
Did you tell him you were going to ask him about that shooting before the interview?
We just sat down and just did it.
Was there any sort of sense that he might be upset about the idea of having to talk about that?
I don't go into interviews wondering if a person's going to be upset about the questions.
Sometimes. When there's certain things that you want to ask about that you, like, you know, there's a rapper that I might be interviewing very soon who allegedly has been robbed a couple of times in recent memory. Pretty, like, tough dude. I'm not really, you know, I'm a little bit worried about what might happen when I start to say, well, I heard this happen, I heard this happened.
I mean, there's an art form in how to ease into questions. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a way to do it and a way not to do it. Like, you know, if we sat down and say, hey, you got robbed, right? You're not going to get a very good reaction. But, you know, if you go ahead and you talk about a bunch of, you know, you talk about the person's history, you talk about other things, and they start to get a feel for the way that you conduct yourself, you could ease into the most uncomfortable questions without the person being defensive. And like I said, it's like I interviewed Jamel Hill, and you know she had been doing it for a very long time as well as a journalist, and we talked about, you know, she mentioned how interviewing is really more of a craft than like something you learn in college.
Right.
And you only get good at it by doing it year after year after year. You know, I'm sure you could look at some of your old interviews and be like, cringe.
There's things I've said in this interview that I immediately in my head was like, you shouldn't have worded it like that. You should, you know, it's like you need to have that gene of constantly wanting to inspect and analyze how you talk and how you're carrying out this conversation. Yeah,
exactly. So it's one of those things, man. It's you know, you could ask anything, you just have to know how to ask it. And, you know, I mean, listen, there's stuff that I didn't ask certain people that I just didn't ask for whatever reason, but most times I kind of, you know, the game plan that I lay out is what I usually follow through on.
When you saw Ebro making those comments to Kodak Black about his rape case, how did you think about the way he handled that?
It's not the way I would have handled it. Kodak Black has an open case, so it's very touchy. You know, I try not to talk about people's open cases. You could look at like the interview I did with the baby, and you know, at this point, the whole
now it's resolved.
The whole shooting thing is resolved, which we thought it would be, but at the time, it wasn't.
Because if he says something a little bit messy on camera with you, that could all of a sudden be brought up in court easy.
Right.
Like probably would happen if he said something.
We contacted the police department ahead of time to see where they were with the case.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, I mean, like we did our due diligence.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Like we're like, okay, is this still an open case or it's not? They're like, it was still an open case. I said, all right, cool. So when we got to that part of the interview, I just said, look, I know it's an open case, so, you know, I'm not going to talk about it. You know, I mean, you did go on IG Live and talk about it, which I'm not quite sure why, but you know, that was your decision. But I'm not going to add to whatever you've already said, because you know, contrary to popular opinion, like I'm not trying to have anything in an interview be used in a court case. And I'm not trying to have a situation where something was said that could ultimately hurt the person later on. And there's lots of people who want to do interviews with us, with people who are, you know, awaiting trial, and because they just want to get their story out. But it's like, nah, this is, you know, you should listen to your lawyer. You know, and if you have an open case, you probably shouldn't do interviews, period, at all. You should really just keep your mouth shut until after the trial.
But then there's also the extent to which you, in your head, you're thinking, well, I'm giving you a platform. You can say whatever the fuck you want. It's really not my fault, whatever you say.
No, I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. I understand the impact of what I do, and I understand the impact of the platform, and I understand that what comes out, you know, this is why I'm careful about statutes of limitations, and you know, or if a person already, you know, served out the prison term for what they talked about. Like, you know, Freeway Ricky Ross is one of, you know, our biggest guests. And, you know, we talk about all the, you know, the millions and millions of dollars of drugs that he pushed, you know, in his early years, but he did like 25 years over that. So he has the right to talk about that at this point.
That's always the people who are the most lit. Like the Casanova interview you did, where he's just going super in depth about what it's like robbing liquor stores. Right. But he already went to jail for it, so he was able to just be super open about it. That was great.
Yeah, man, it was a dope interview. Yeah. Shout out to Casanova.
That was a legendary one. Was that something that you knew about? You knew about that beforehand, and you just wanted to ask about it, or how did you like necessarily know about exactly what he went to prison for?
I mean, I still am friends with Taxstone. Right. That was Taxstone's artist. Back when Taxstone was out.
So you just know.
And so, you know, me and Taxstone kind of had a conversation. And it's like, hey, you know, give me a little bit of background about the dude. And, you know, he told me. And, you know, at the end of the day, if he didn't want to talk about it, we would have went on to the next question. But he served his time. He wanted to talk about it. The interview got millions of views. You know, I think it helped him out in terms of his perception overall. And, you know, it was a dope interview, dope artist.
No, that was dope. When did you start to feel like you really started to get a lot of like negative feedback, when that became an element? Because there is a certain percentage of fans out there, hip hop fans, who really feel like DJ Vlad is a fed or just overall a bad guy. When did that start to brew, and how have you always made sense of it?
I think kind of from day one to a certain degree, because I came into it not following the hip hop interview blueprint. You know what I mean? Like, all the people that I was listening to, they all did these softball kind of interviews. You know, I ended up, I directed an episode of American Gangster, actually on Mac Dre and the Romper Room Gang. So I got to sort of put together this kind of a mini documentary on this artist with a serious criminal element to it. And you know, it was such a dope piece when it came out that I'm like, okay, I'm going to take what I did with American Gangster and I'm going to apply it to my own platform. You know, so there was always that element. And I kind of, you know, felt like, well, look, if you got these gangster rappers who talk about the shit in their songs, let's talk about it, you know, in interviews, which really nobody in the hip hop media really ever did. Like I said, everyone was either too scared, or they wanted to be the artist's friend, or they just that wasn't what they wanted to do.
When you go back and look at XXL and The Source and shit before the internet came around, it's so obvious that the labels were governing how this shit came out.
Yeah. So it was sort of like, I looked at this and I'm like, a lot of this shit is just lame. Like, it's a bunch of, this wouldn't fly in the real media journalism world.
Right.
Like, the LA Times wouldn't be doing interviews like this. 60 Minutes or 2020 would not be, or Oprah wouldn't be doing these types of interviews. But yet with hip hop, this is all they fucking do. So I'm like, fuck this. Like, I'm gonna really do this like how the big boys are doing it, how the CNNs and everything are doing it, and that automatically created a backlash from day one. But I'm like, all right, backlash it is. Let's do it. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the numbers speak for themselves. So I don't really care what an average person behind a keyboard has to say about what I do. Like, unless you're part of my company, your opinion really just doesn't matter. It's really about is this reacting? Is this creating a dialogue? Is it getting the views? Is it making an impact? And if I'm the bad guy in the process, okay, that's a sacrifice I'm willing to take. I'm not trying to be the I'm behind the camera anyway, so I'm not here to try to be as popular as possible. That's not my goal. My goal is to build a business and create incredible content.
Right. But I mean, is there anything that really gets on your skin that people say about you, or is it just easy to brush it off? Because most of it is not really too grounded in reality. When they say you're a cop or whatever, it's kind of like there's no use to argue with it because they're just fucking around. They couldn't possibly be being serious, right?
I mean, you could check the paperwork. You know what I mean? Like, by the time this interview drops, I think, I just did an interview with Michael Franzese.
Oh,
who was the highest ranking mafia member, from a major crime family, from the Colombo family, that, he was a capo who walked away. And in the interview, he talked about doing business with Al Sharpton and how, I guess there was a drug deal that, Al got caught up in, and he ended up turning into an FBI informant who wore a wire.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? And Al Sharpton even addressed this publicly. He said, yes,
previously spoke on it.
Yeah, I wore a wire because I was protecting my community. He spun it whatever way.
Right.
But people call me a Fed. And they love Al Sharpton.
Right.
But Al Sharpton was wearing a wire.
Right.
And getting people busted, allegedly, I guess. You know what I mean? Cooperating with the actual FBI and wearing a wire. But y'all love Al Sharpton, but y'all hate me. Like, all right.
Right.
That's how you want to do it. It is what it is.
Yeah. But so,
yeah, I mean, no, the shit doesn't bother me, man.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, like, we sign up for this.
Do you have a policy in regards to how you will get into an argument with somebody who's talking shit about you? Because you said to me previously that you just won't respond to anybody when they're going in on you. But then if it's a public figure, I noticed that you had like a recent thing with Vince Staples, for instance. You actually responded to him, but I mean, he's been on your platform. He's a big name.
Yeah. That was maybe like about a year or two ago. Not super recent. Yeah, I mean, I think with that, I actually kind of started it.
You did start it, yeah. You said Vince won't do the interview.
Well, because I did an interview with Vince a long time ago, and it was done remotely at the time. Like, we weren't in the same room, but it was me who did the interview with him. And people would just hit me sometimes and be like, yo, how come, bring Vince back? And I'm like, well, I think Vince is mad at me. And then he responded, he's like, well, why did you think I'm mad at you? And I'm like, well, and then we kind of started, it wasn't like a beef back and forth. It was actually a real lighthearted conversation where I'm like, yo, listen, I'm a fan. Like,
But he's somebody who used to just use the media to build himself up, and then you've seen his like new approach is to just like his new album. I think he only did Big Boy, who was actually on the album, but he only did one interview. So it's like kind of interesting, like for somebody like his perspective, that he could use the media to get a shitload of headlines, but also sort of have his story written by the media to a certain extent, because he's allowing them to sort of govern the conversation about it.
I mean, look, a lot of artists get to a certain point. I mean, usually the bigger artist gets, a lot of times they do less interviews.
Now that's like the precedent. The bigger the artist is, the less media that they do. If they get really big, they're no interviews or one with Zane Lowe every year.
Yeah, right.
That kind of thing.
How many Jay-Z or Drake interviews do you see?
Right.
Not that many.
And they typically own the platform that it's coming out on.
Yeah,
now.
Like Jay did it on Tidal.
Right, which is much respect, because that's some smart shit right there,
Yeah, man. But yeah, I mean, people, you can't really take this shit personally, because it's like, in the same way that, for example, sometimes an artist, they're coming up and they ask us for an interview and we don't say yes, and they get to a certain point and then we'll ask them for an interview. It's like, well, you fronted on us when I had 1,000 followers. And it's like, well, yeah.
Yeah, nobody gave a shit about you back then.
I did front on you.
Yeah.
And there's artists that look at our platform and say, well, this is not big enough for me to do. Like Vlad TV, like I'd rather go do Good Morning America because it's a bigger platform. So I can't have my feelings hurt over that. So it's all, I used to interview French Montana all the time when he was an underground artist. And he got to a certain point, and he's messing with the Kardashians, and he doesn't feel he needs to do Vlad TV interviews anymore. And that's fine. It's cool.
Somebody like him, do you still have your team send out a request every once in a while, just see if they're, because presumably in French Montana's career, there'll be a downswing, and at some point he'll be like, well, shit, maybe I do need the Vlad TV interview.
Maybe, or maybe not.
But do you have your team still like reach out to people on a regular basis, or? It
depends. If they're going on a promo run, because we kind of monitor what interviews people are doing with other platforms, yours included, and so we'll reach out. And a lot of times the bigger artists, we don't get a yes, but a lot of our business these days is kind of formed around our what I call a regular guest. So like for example, Nick Cannon, Boosie, Godfrey, Dion Cole,
Lord Jamar,
Trey D, BG Knockout, John Sally, China Mac.
You do have a nice repertoire there.
A big group, and I know I'm forgetting one or two, and they're going to kill me like when they see this. But Freeway Ricky Ross, once again, a lot of these people who D.L. Hughley, a bunch of people who I think are just incredible people who just come back every couple months and we'll just chop it up again. And that's really what a lot of the business is based off of. So if we could get a number one artist who's on a promo tour, great. We got Lil Yachty last time. Great. But if we never get Lil Yachty again, we'll be fine.
Yeah, that's kind of something I've dealt with the podcast, is like realizing that you don't want to be 100% reliant on your ability to get the hot new artists, because you need to have like a backbone to the business for the time periods that you aren't able to get the crazy ass interviews that you want to get.
Right.
Yeah. Is there what goes into picking your guests? Because some of the people that you see, like when you're saying the mob boss guy, I'm sitting there looking at my YouTube subscriptions, I'm like, wow, that's a great idea to interview that guy. That would have never fucking occurred to me. What's that process like?
I mean, it's never the same every time. Like I said, sometimes it's okay. Who are what are our competitors? Who are they interviewing? But
somebody like him seems sort of out of left field.
Sometimes he was on a platform called Valuetainment.
Okay.
And it got like 6 million views or something.
Oh, I think so. I did see that working.
Well, if it got 6 million views with these guys, we might be able to do more than that.
Bring them over to a different audience.
And it's even though we don't usually interview white Italian guys, he's a gangster on a similar level to some of the people we've interviewed. So it's like, this could work. And we just run with it. Sometimes people pitch us. We constantly have emails every day with people pitching us. Sometimes it'll just be me watching TV and say, what about this guy?
Right.
If there's if there's some sort of like for example, Surviving R. Kelly came out, so we got public announcement. R. Kelly's first group. Then we got Lisa Van Allen, who was part of Surviving R. Kelly, and what I mean. It's like sometimes you just got to look to see where things are heading and see what angle you could choose off of, where the energy is.
Right. How many people would you say you have on your team that are really making this thing happen? Because you it's not just you. Which a lot of people probably think it's just you.
Nah, definitely not. There's around 10 people. I mean, I have a whole big office/studio in Manhattan.
Okay.
In Midtown. Like if you see that big giant red couch, and some of the pictures I put up, like that's my studio. Like my whole video editing team is there. Part of my writing team is there. But I also have, an assistant. I have, writers that work remotely. I have a bunch of kind of regular contractors in terms of cameramen that I use. 10 full-time people, probably about 15 altogether in terms of regular contractors, if you include those.
If you sit down and do an interview with somebody, how much of the questions is coming straight from your brain versus like somebody sort of preparing thoughts beforehand?
Well, I have an assistant, Evan, who's been with me for years now, and me and him have sort of worked out kind of a research kind of skeleton, I guess, for every guest. He understands the types of interviews that I do with the types of people. You know, I mean, is this going to be one of these first interviews where it's more of like a life story thing, or is this more of a current events kind of interview? So he knows kind of how to structure that. And then I'll just spend, you know, like a couple of days, you know, just kind of going through those questions, you know, taking out certain questions, adding my own, doing my own research, kind of creating certain things that he may not have covered, or just going off in a whole different direction. And then from there, I'll kind of have an overall game plan. And, you know, and then we'll see whether we follow it. You know, are we going to follow it from, you know, from beginning to end, or halfway through does it all get thrown out the window and we do something completely different?
Right.
But there is a lot of research.
Right.
Like, I'm not just winging it. And a lot of people do.
Right, I'm winging it right now. See,
Right.
I just call it raw dogging it. Like, you know, I got to interview this pretty famous porn star later, and my girlfriend was like, you should watch this interview that she did. I'm like, nah, I'm just a raw dog it. You know, it's like two very different styles, because it would be one thing to interview her and say, well, I got these 10 fucking banger things to ask you. Or, you know, I could just sort of, like, for me, mine is much more conversational. It's about just, you know, having a nice chat.
Yeah, man, I think both styles have their merits. You know, I think that with me, whenever I did it, you know, in terms of like the off the cuff style that you're talking about, afterwards I'd be like, damn, I should have asked him that. And had I written it down, I would have asked him.
In the middle of this interview, I was like, man, I forgot to ask Big Boy about being on that Vince Staples album, which would have been.
This is what happened. It's like the regret kept happening whenever I would wing it. Because I interviewed Kanye back in the day.
Really?
Yeah, I don't have it anymore. It was an audio interview in the studio when he was working with Common on his album. There's a picture with like the three of us out there.
And you just didn't have a camera guy at that time?
Well, I mean, we weren't really, I mean, I was doing mixtapes back then. So a camera wasn't even part of the, I mean, we're talking about like 2004, you know, 15 years ago. But like, I remember just not really having any questions, and he just kept freestyling because he knew I didn't have any questions.
He's got to be one of the easiest people to interview.
Yeah, man. He, like, I'll put it like this. The Kanye that you see in 2019 was exactly the Kanye that I met and talked to in 2004.
Really?
And this was before his first hit song, like Slow Jams, he played it for me in the studio for the first time. Which became his first big hit.
Did it seem clear to you that this was going to be a massive song?
Yeah, I knew that was going to be a hit.
Yeah.
It was.
It was
a dope ass song. Yeah. But it was like, yeah, he was just kind of the producer who was trying to rap. There's been lots of producers that have tried to rap.
It's very rare that it works.
It didn't really, pieces don't come together. Now he's known more of a rapper as a producer, but back then it was like, that's the guy that does the Jay-Z beats. Like, but when I heard that song, it was like, okay, this is a hit.
Did you have a different vision for what Vlad TV was going to be at a certain point? Because there'll be random interviews that I go to watch, and you'll have just different people doing the interview instead of you, and nowadays it seems like it's all you.
Yeah, I mean, you go through different cycles with your business, right? You don't really know where your business is going to lead until you try out different things. So at one point, I would have my staff interview people, and you know, the first Cardi B interview was done with a staff member. The second Cardi B interview was done with me. They're both good interviews. I'm not going to say one is necessarily better than the other, but you know, after a while, you know, because I was thinking like, well, listen, I'm growing, I'm getting bigger, you know, I need to branch off and I need to focus on certain things, and maybe having other people do interviews just under my platform might be the thing. But, you know, at one point I just said, well, it just seems like the interviews turn out better when I do them myself. And if I want to keep building the platform, I'm going to have to put, and I want it to be bigger, I'm going to have to put more pressure on my shoulders. And I'll just start doing them all myself. So like this year, you know, if you look at the last few years, I've done all the interviews. Right. And you know, it may change. You never know. But at this point, it's like, okay, this just works out better business-wise. Yeah,
because there's like a part of you that's like, especially in yours, because you could have somebody else behind the camera. You've always been behind the camera. It sort of makes it easier for you to sub different people in. You know, like even me, I see that Cardi B thumbnail, and it's been so long since I watched it that I wasn't thinking about the fact that you didn't actually do that interview. But I mean, yeah, there's a part of you that's like, I want to develop a whole bunch of different personalities that can sort of, I can be more like the coach, but then after a while, it sort of occurs to you like, shit, if I'm not you know, if I'm not going to be happy with the results of this with anybody else doing it.
Yeah, and you know, this is not going to go on forever. I can't be 100 years old
Right.
and interview an 18-year-old. It's going to be weird.
Does that ever feel weird to you when you have to interview somebody super young, or the lifestyle that they're expressing is so obviously a bad idea? Like if somebody were to come in and start talking about drugs and guns as if it's the best shit ever, and you're sitting there and you're somebody, you've seen this 100 times before, there's a part of you that wants to say, bro, that's not it.
I mean, but I do say that. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I've interviewed Lil Blurry, which you've interviewed before. I've interviewed a couple kids, you know, underage, you know, kids that had to have someone else sign their release form.
Like at the skate park, yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, I remember we got an interview. I'm not going to say who it is, but it was an underage kid, who I think you've interviewed. And we were going to do an interview with him. And as I started reviewing my notes, I started to realize that he was like 15 and he's talking about doing drugs all throughout his music as a 15-year-old. And I'm like, nah, I'm good.
Really?
Yeah, I just canceled it.
Lil Mosey?
Don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Don't think so. I think, I don't think it was Lil Mosey.
Oh, there's plenty of people that could probably fit that description.
Yeah, but it was just like, all right, you know, and even with Lil Blurry, I said, hey, there was a song about you talking about lean, and he's like, oh no, he's like, no, you're right, I took that off right away. This is not what I'm trying to present.
And him being signed to Boosie is like so hilarious, because it's like there's nobody who can tell you about why you shouldn't do lean better than fucking Boosie.
Yeah, man. So yeah, man. I mean, in terms of, I mean, even when I'm interviewing dudes in their 20s or 30s, like you'll see a very serious, you know, tone to what I do. I don't glorify doing crimes. I don't glorify doing drugs, hard drugs. I don't glorify stealing, robbing. I don't glorify throwing money away at the strip clubs. You know, Vlad talks about investment. I talk about long-term goals. I talk about building businesses. I honestly want, I mean, everyone that I interview them a year later and have them be twice as successful, twice as wealthy, out of jail. Like, I want them to be doing well. I'm not trying to glorify something that I know as someone in my 40s has a dead end and has a bad ending. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah, I go through that all the time. And I mean, in terms of interviewing younger people, man, I mean, at this point, I could do it. You know, 10 years from now, I may not be able to do it. I may have to hire somebody that will interview more of a younger generation. But, you know, for now, it's, you know, it's dope. You know, I think that a lot of people grow up, you know, we launched in 2008, so we're like 11 years into it. A lot of people grew up aspiring to be rappers, watching Vlad TV interviews, hoping one day to make it.
That's such a good feeling, right? That once you realize like that there's like another generation coming up to which you were something that they were raised from day one on. That's a freaky feeling.
Yeah, man. I mean, you know, Big Boy, he went on Instagram recently to talk about the Kodak Black Lauryn Hill comments, and he said something interesting. He said, I was raised by hip hop and I raised hip hop. And I kind of feel the same way to a certain degree. Like, I was raised by hip hop, and the content I put out has raised a generation of upcoming rappers. You know, I remember how excited Big Sean was when I first interviewed him when he first got signed, and it's like that feeling is always like, this is so, like it makes everything worthwhile when stuff like that happens.
No, totally. Just to be involved in the story, because seeing somebody go from nothing to something in a short period of time is always so amazing, even if you're just somebody watching on the outside. And then to have any sort of involvement, or especially when you play like a really critical role in that, like when you feel like your interview content becomes like this indispensable resource that like their career might not have unfolded the same way if you didn't have that conversation.
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, anyone who is thinking about joining a gang, go watch that Mob James interview. And I can guarantee you're probably gonna reassess your mindset. I mean, you know, some people are born into that situation and it just is what it is. But if you actually say, okay, like, do I want to join the Crips or the Bloods or MS-13 or, you know, the Mexican Mafia or whatever other, you know, Latin Kings, BD, you know, BD, GD, whatever, watch these interviews and see the amount of heartache and loss that goes into this particular lifestyle, and then decide whether you want to do it knowing everything. And I think that we've stopped a lot of people from making bad decisions with our interviews over the years.
No, probably. I mean, the best thing that you can do is just put the information out there and just have as many people as possible take it in, and just hope that they're able to, find the best possible message in that. Because anybody could look at, there's a million kids who watched American History X and said, oh, being a Nazi is bad. But there's still thousands of people who saw that fucking movie that is all about how being a Nazi is bad and still went and became Nazis.
Yeah, man, sometimes you gotta learn the hard way.
Yeah.
I think that's part of being a kid, is that you think that everyone older than you just doesn't know. It's full of shit. But, I think, I say this a lot, like, to anybody who wants to be successful, realistically, you should look at the people in their 40s and their 50s and their 60s and see how they did it. Don't look at the Lil Pumps who managed to catch a wave and ride it to being a millionaire. The odds of you being Lil Pump is much smaller than you being, the CEO of, a company that makes a couple $1 million a year. You have much more chances of doing that than to be a Lil Pump. And, a lot of people, like to say that being an old head or whatever, is not what they want to do. But it takes a lot of intelligence and common sense to get to my age, to not leave the earth in their 20s and 30s by just doing irresponsible shit.
And you seem like somebody who, we've had conversations where you're talking about being in the club when you were younger and stuff like that. Was there like a moment, was there anything in particular that happened that made you like, I don't want to live this risky lifestyle of always being out and always being in these situations and everything, and hip hop, just going to a club or going to a event or whatever, especially when you're a high profile person, there's all kinds of risk that comes with that. It seems like you sort of stay away from that.
Yeah, well, I have security with me. My security guy is right outside the door
Very
right now.
serious guy, by the way.
No one pulling no guns on me in this interview.
That doesn't seem like it, no.
Yeah, man, you pull a gun on me in an interview, you're gonna get shot in the head.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where you get to a point and you think, okay, does the effort and resources and money that it takes to go out, does that bring more value to the company as opposed to just staying in? Because the way I have to move these days isn't free anymore. I can't just go to the club by myself to go meet some friends and just hope for the best.
Right.
I have to have security. That security has to be scheduled. It has to be coordinated. When we go over there, there's a certain process involved and everything else like that. And you get to a point where it's like, I'm going out all the time, and you're running into people and you're getting some interviews and you're making some contacts, and that's cool. But are we also big enough to the point where our reputation is there, where a phone call accomplishes the same thing? And a lot of times it does. So you say, okay, this part is not as necessary anymore. Because best believe for like 10 years, from my, kind of like my DJ career to like part of my Vlad TV career, I was going out 3-4 times a week, every listening party, every event, every All-Star weekend, every...
In your head, were you working when you were doing that?
I was working.
I was
working, and it was fun.
Yeah.
At the time, there's beautiful girls, there's open bar, there's the energy of it. When you're cool with the artist and you're there and on stage with them or in the VIP or whatever, and there's a thrill involved in that, but there's also like, certain things happen. You run into this crew and they have a problem and a standoff happens, or you have to leave, or something happens, and you're like, is it really necessary for me to keep doing this all the time? And for me, the answer started to become no at a certain point. So,
and it's also just something to be said for, you know, if you're doing interviews, there's a lot of time spent studying, thinking about it, getting ready, even just like you're saying, like just watching TV. I feel like if I were to sit down and watch TV for a couple hours right now of just random whatever the fuck is on TV, that I'm going to end up with a couple of different ideas for people I could hit up, or just different types of content I could do. You know, if you give yourself that space, and I think being well rested is incredibly important with what we do.
Right.
It's probably like there's a lot of people who act like not sleeping is this great cheat code through life. If you want to be good on camera, not sleeping is your fucking enemy.
Or even off camera.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
true.
like, listen, like, I think about this all the time. If my only job was to come in and do an interview with someone that whatever radio station or company has already booked for me, and I would just wing the interview.
You could breeze through that, especially if you aren't completely responsible for what the end result, the content is. If you could just phone it in and do a half-assed job and it's still fine.
My life would be so much easier, but I have an office, you know, full of people. There's a whole infrastructure between human resources and taxes and the legal part, and, you know, making sure everything's up to code. You know, there's the website, there's the YouTube channel, there's producing. You know, we put out 5 clips a day plus a flashback every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So you're talking about 7 times 7 is 49. You're talking about almost 200 pieces of content a month that we're putting out that I have to overlook. Think about all the things that can go wrong along the way. You know, a lot of my time is spent becoming a better manager and creating a better process and creating an infrastructure in place where this machine can function. That's what most of my time is spent. The interview shit is almost fun.
Right.
You know, if that's all I had to do, then yeah, I can go out every night and then just go do an interview in the morning. But I have a company and I have a dozen people who rely on me to pay their rent and feed themselves and their families. I can't just go and fuck that off and just say, you know something, I'm just gonna just disappear for a week. Like, I don't have that luxury.
Do you take vacations?
I haven't taken a vacation in like 3 years.
Really?
Real talk. Yeah.
Is that something that you want to do?
Absolutely. I've been trying to get to Asia for fucking ever.
Really?
Like Hong Kong and Singapore. Like, I've never been.
It seems like you do so much content that it would be pretty easy for you to be able to schedule enough stuff out in advance.
Yeah, man. Life just gets a hold of you. The last big vacation I took was in Russia. I went to Moscow and St. Petersburg, and that was dope. You know, I got to really go back to, you know, the country I was born in and stay at the nicest hotels and really, you know, experience it at what I felt was some of the highest levels. Because, you know, we were poor family back then under a communist system. So to be able to come in and do shit that we only dreamed about was dope. But yeah, man, I wish I could take more vacations.
How do you deal with, you know, as a person involved in hip hop, you could choose to indulge in all the things that the rappers do with the designer and the cars and the jewelry or everything like that. What stops you from doing that, or to what extent do you indulge in all the spoils that come with you know, presumably making quite a good amount of money?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have big giant chains because that's never really been my thing, but most of the other shit I've pretty much covered.
Oh, okay. So you have done like the jewelry thing and...
Yeah, I mean, I like watches. You know, my houses are pretty nice. You know, my cars are pretty nice. You know, my business is profitable, and there's an income coming in, and there's money being invested and everything else like that. I'm just not, you know, it may not look like, you know, a lot of people just judge based on appearance. It's like, well, if you're not wearing 10 chains, you must be broke. Well,
right.
You know.
I know you're definitely not broke. I see you like not going so out of your way to represent yourself as being, you know, in the position that you presumably are.
Yeah, but that just comes with more just being yourself. You know, like, if I was always in the chains, I can go buy these same chains that you see, you know, the trippy reds with. Like, I can go buy one of these trippy red type chains if I really wanted to. It's just never been my thing. So you know, as you get older, you just kind of become more comfortable with who you are, and you know, you're not trying to create an image of who you're not. And I think with a lot of these guys, like the Trippies and the like who's another person who's really big on chains.
I mean, Future and Thug stand
Future,
out to
Young
me as
Thug,
having
like, yeah, I
outrageous
mean-
jewelry collections.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really them. I think that's something they've always wanted,
Yeah.
and they've never had it.
And it's a very solid marketing tactic as
Yeah.
a rapper, so it probably pays for itself to some extent.
Yeah, yeah, and they're also in front of the camera. They're also selling a whole lifestyle. So a lot of it is, the chain reaction. I interviewed Yellow Beezy. He said when he got a big chain, people looked at him different, and he got booked for more shows. But that's just not me. So for me to try to be that would just be disingenuous to who I really am. So
What weirded me out about young Yellow Beezy was like I searched his name on WorldStar and just going back and like watching him slowly go from a rapper who had to pay to get on WorldStar to a rapper who was just doing a shitload of views on WorldStar on his own. Like that gives me a lot of pleasure just sort of watching that development.
yeah, me too, man. Me too.
Is there anything that stands out to you that you want your company to do going forward that you aren't currently doing? Are you solely focused on just building out this process that you have going now, or is there like different types of content that you're interested in? Or
I mean, it's a hard question because a lot of times the shit that looks the coolest doesn't necessarily pay the best. Like you could have a movie on Netflix or a documentary on Netflix, and most movies lose money.
But if you had a documentary on Netflix tomorrow and it's Vlad presents this, blah, 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 everybody's going to be looking at you like you just killed it, like you just did the best move of your career.
Yeah.
Little do they know you're making X amount of dollars off YouTube every month.
I've had 2 documentaries and I got paid like $25,000 for each of them and never saw a penny past that. And I look at that amount of money and I laugh. Like these days, the amount of work involved in creating that documentary as either a producer or director, the hours of sitting with your editor and saying, move that, move this, take this out, put this in, just the amount of work involved in that to make what I consider these days to be a small chunk of money, and never having no ownership, having no residuals, nothing, is just like, it's just a vanity thing. And I don't really care about that vanity shit, because Netflix doesn't pay royalties. Like they buy your shit and we'll get an exclusive for like a certain number of years and they'll own the digital rights. You don't see Netflix movies on YouTube because of the deal that Netflix does. What Netflix is doing is essentially what Vlad TV is doing. They're creating a bunch of content and keeping it, forever. And
you make money off of YouTube ads. They make money off of Netflix.
Yeah, off of
$10 a month,
subscriptions. Yeah. So it's kind of like, you have to understand, like, do you want to be rich or do you want to be popular? For me, popularity was never the thing. And a lot of people will do a bunch of shit to stay popular and, live in a studio apartment. This is not what I was trying to do. And as you get older, you start to take that a lot more seriously.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot to be said for just having your own business and creating content on your own, and now people are 100% like enabled to do so.
Yeah.
And I understand completely why somebody might go and get a show with Complex or Revolt or whatever, but it's kind of like, I feel like if you don't have to do that, like we should be encouraging more people. Like there are more people doing the kind of things that we do on YouTube and creating businesses where they can become millionaires off of doing their own thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an amazing opportunity that wasn't available to anybody in any other part of history.
And also owning your own thing.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about that. Like, I've had talks with Revolt, but none of it made any financial sense. I'm not here to make another platform rich.
Right.
And use my my following and my talents and everything else like that. Or we don't even really license shit. How many times like Vice or some other documentary company or some TV company or a movie company come to us, oh, we want to license this, and it's like, nah, we're good. And then they get surprised, like, how come you don't want to? And it's like, because we got our own platform to monetize it on. Like, why would I? Once I give it to y'all, now this piece is on your platform and my piece is less valuable because now you can see it in multiple places. And this is why like so many people focus on going viral, but like my thing is like, all right, you could put up a 30-second or a minute clip, but if you want to start chopping up my interviews into like 5 pieces to the point where the whole interview is on your Instagram or on your Twitter feed, like I'll go ahead and file a copyright strike and get that shit taken down. You know,
Right.
like, you know, we used to make, you know, social media clips for every interview, and once we stopped doing that, we noticed that our traffic went up.
Really?
Yeah, which was kind of counterintuitive to a certain degree, but it was like, yo, we actually do better when people have to come to us as opposed to like, well, I just saw the best 45 seconds. I don't even need to watch the real interview anymore.
No, it happens all the time too. Like I've seen that, you know, Murder Mook has a podcast or whatever, and Yes Jules went on it, and it was super controversial, and like, you know, everybody's talking about it. The clips on Twitter had millions of views, and then I went back and saw the original clip on YouTube, and I think it had like 30K or, you know, 25K. Like, people were not going back to watch the whole thing.
People were not going back, and that's what people don't realize. This is the popularity versus business part of the conversation. So it's kind of like, yeah, you know, if my clip gets 1.5 million views on someone's Instagram page, yeah, I guess that's cool if ultimately the traffic goes back to my YouTube channel. But if it doesn't, it's a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah.
You know, well, this is why, you know, we had, you know, at one point we were paying you know, we would pay to get up on certain big Instagram pages, but I just started to notice that it was like, it's not really, you know, it doesn't turn into actual viewers on our platforms. It just ends up going viral on someone else's platform, Instagram. And, you know, to me, it's not the focus of what I do.
Especially once you've gone to a certain level of notoriety, you know? Like when you're brand new in the game, you're happy as fuck for any kind of attention. After a while, it kind of, you got to look at
man.
what the effects are.
It's a business. It's a business, man. It's a business, and it's also a level of ownership that you have to maintain. So it's kind of like people get mad, like, "Oh, how are you gonna file a copyright strike?" No, I was giving you promotion. Like, well,
people always say that, like, I need your fucking promo.
I didn't ask for your promo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're just stealing my content.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, you're telling me how I'm supposed to feel about it?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, but they don't get it because they're just trying to get followers or whatever else.
I never had something taken down like that, but that was a good idea.
Yeah, I get shit taken down. Well, like I said, or if you sit there like and you cut out our logo and add your own weird ass logo on it, it's like, I mean, you can't even tell it's my shit anymore. You know, I remember someone was like, they were taking my clips and they're putting it on their Instagram page, and a couple of them I just grabbed and put on my own Instagram, and the guy's like, hey, you know, can you give me credit because I took the time to you know, grab your videos and edit them. And I'm like, you want me to give you credit for taking my shit and putting on your shit when I own this shit? You know what I mean? Because you know, you're talking about every interview like costs upwards of thousands of dollars between the time involved, the editing, everyone who's, you know, people who are writing it up, people who are posting it, you know, like copywriting it, you know, and the whole system around it. Like, this is a big production. This is not just Vlad with a fucking iPhone.
Right.
So, you know, we protect our shit, and we copyright every video. There's a copy with a copyright office. So if you want to go ahead and just take the shit, you know, it's no different than if you want to go and grab the new Drake song. There might be some copyright issues involved in it because it's a real business. It's not just for fun.
Definitely. Yeah, shit. What are you excited about? Are there? Oh yeah, this is what I wanted to ask. Are there any like just dream interviews that you could potentially get? Because the other day I was doing Haha Davis, so I know you did as well. But he was just saying how he had just done lunch with Jay-Z right before he came to do the interview with me, and I was just thinking, I'm like, God, that's fucking crazy. Like, you know, Jay-Z, that's got to be the hardest to get interviewed. That's got to be the one that there's the most people in rap who would be the most excited about. You know, it's like there's always those ones that are just sort of pie in the sky, but it's always a possibility. Is there anything that really like lingers in your brain? Like, it would be amazing to get that.
I mean, shit, I think everything's a possibility, right? I put my platform up there with anybody. I mean, I've never done Jay-Z. I filmed like Ed Lover when he interviewed Jay-Z back when I was just filming his interviews on Power 105. So I've been in the same room with him as he was doing an interview and filming, but not actually doing the interview myself. But, you know, I've never met Eminem. I've never interviewed him. I've never interviewed Obama. I met Drake once, but we've never done an interview. Trying to think who else.
Drake actually told me he was going to do the interview and then didn't do it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really like, he wasn't really saying he was going to do it. He's like, I got to do one of them interviews sometime.
Yeah.
It didn't really.
Yeah. Me and Young Thug have never done an interview, even though when someone else was doing it for us, like one of my staff members was interviewing his fiance or girlfriend, and he jumped into the interview.
Really?
And kind of,
I
talk some shit. There's a lot of people, man. We were supposed to get a Hillary Clinton interview when she was running. That never happened, but we came close.
You know why it didn't happen? Any particular reason presented?
No. We were supposed to get Farrakhan. That didn't happen. Sometimes people around the person would be like, nah. We were supposed to get Jay Prince. That almost happened. It didn't happen. Lots of people. I'd like to get Denzel one of these days. I'd like to get Tom Cruise.
That's the interesting thing too, that you go in that direction of doing like actors from the 70s, 80s. Like, a lot of them have amazing stories, but just
we just did. I did Bill Duke not too long ago. I did Michael Jai White.
Yeah.
Not too long ago. I just did Malik Yoba.
Right.
That just came out. I was a huge New York Undercover fan. Actors, professional athletes, rappers, singers, criminal figures.
Yeah.
I try to go all over the place with it. And honestly, it's like, I remember, a friend of mine was like, hey, I want to do an interview. I want you to interview on my platform. I just got authorization for the company, that I'm working with. They okayed you. And I'm thinking like, wow, that's so interesting. I don't have to get an okay from anybody, but they're cutting probably a nice check for him. So he has to go through that process. But for me, it's like, I look in the mirror and I say, okay, that's what we're doing.
Every time I ever had a conversation with any kind of TV producer, that's always how I feel, is like, wow, like they want me to do basically what I'm doing, but with way more production values and stuff, but then they're going to be telling me what to do. There's just so many parts that I'm just like,
they're probably going to own it.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. And that just is like, it's so hard for me to wrap my head around why I would want to do that.
Hey, man, there's usually one reason.
Yeah.
For the check.
But that's why it doesn't seem like the reason.
Or for the look. For the look.
That's the problem with people like me and you, is that anyone who wants to have a conversation with like that about making content together with us, it's just, those numbers don't really mean a lot compared to how much I'm doing off of just YouTube or whatever else.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Crazy. All right. Well, hey, Vlad, I'm very much appreciative of you coming in and doing the interview. It's been my goal to do it for a while, and hopefully I shed some light for all the people out there who I'm sure have been curious over the years.
Hey, man, I always feel it's fair, like, people that come to my platform when they ask me for an interview, because you were like, because China Mac asked me for an interview, and I said yes. And you're like, hey, you did one for China Mac. I'm like, yeah, that's true.
No, because I asked you a while ago, and you were like, I'm not doing them right now.
Yeah, because I was just not doing interviews during that time. But I'm like, I had to go, I did one for Jamar on his podcast. Then I did one for China Mac. Then when you asked, I'm like, yeah.
I think it's important too, because you just want to make it clear that you're not for you specifically, but for me, it's like, I want to make it clear that I'm not hating on other people trying to get into my position. If anything, I want to help you get into that position, even if it is going to ultimately, just be more fish in the sea trying to do what I'm doing.
I'm not competing with anybody, man. Honestly, I've had you. I've had, Sean Conn from Say Cheese. Me and Big Boy are talking about doing an interview. Like, we all have a place in this, and we all have our fans. And I'm more than happy to give my platform, to show a person that is deserving to be on my platform, even if they are somewhat of a competitor. Like, I've always been like that. So, I think it's all good.
No, definitely. All right, Vlad, I appreciate it, man. And I will continue to watch a ridiculous amount of your content on a daily basis.
That's what it is.
Appreciate
Out of 22, No Jumper.
Hey, No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. Check us out on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes. Let us know below what you think of the new digs or whatever the hell we end up doing with this background here.
Cool.
Appreciate you, Vlad.